Welcome to Bonehead, Mr. William Sandell. Now, do you want to be called Mr. Sandell, William, Will, Bill?
No, Bill's. Bill's great.
I thought it was Bill. I just wanted to make sure. We're from Kentucky,
Sure,
so we have that whole Southern hospitality kind of thing.
So we're going to call him Frank.
We're going to call him Frank, yeah.
Okay, good. That sounds like a start to a show called Bonehead.
Bonehead. Well, actually, a friend of ours who really got us connected with a lot of folks. I don't know if you know him. His name is Mick Strawn. He was a production designer on a lot of movies in the 80s and the 90s. I don't know if you're familiar with him or not.
No, but it's funny I don't, because that's sort of my era. And I was very busy in the 90s, doing back-to-back shows. So
right, yeah.
But no, the name doesn't ring a bell.
Let's just say Mick Strawn gave us we always wanted to, but he was the one that gave us the bloodlust to talk to people who work in Hollywood. So thank you, Mick.
I tell you what he did really well was that he orchestrated this, and we kind of already knew it. We enjoy talking to production designers, artists, directors, writers, behind the scenes folks. Maybe, and I don't necessarily mean this as a negative thing, but maybe someone who's not in the trailer for 4 or 5 hours a day. Make sense?
Yeah.
Right. Because you guys always have the best stories.
Well, yeah, because I never sit around. That's for sure. I mean, the Prop Master would make me a chair with my name on it, and I just tell them, since I got in the business, you're never going to see me sitting in it. No way.
Right.
And that's the last thing a director wants to see, is look over his shoulder and see his production designer sitting there. It's like, hey, what about the next set we're supposed to be moving on to tomorrow? I hope it's ready. They don't. No way would I. I stand. If I'm on the stage, I'm standing. So.
Well, let's start out with a really easy question that I'm sure you've answered 4,000 times. But I read, a little bit about you. There's not a ton of stuff on IMDb. We've been friends on social media for a while, and I follow a lot of you. I love your desert trips to meet with your friend.
Oh yeah.
And
spent a lot of time out there.
Right. So really, what started your love? Was there a particular movie that got you going as a kid, like most of us, or was it just a love for the business? Did you fall into it?
Well, I've lived all my life, and in fact, I'm a 4th generation Los Angeles, person. Yeah. My son being the 5th, and it's. Right. My family wasn't in the entertainment business. They were small businessmen, and I didn't know anybody in the business. But I was an artist, and started showing my kinetic sculptures. Joe, maybe you've seen some on my site that I'm always building.
Yeah, are you building something today that you posted?
Yeah, I just posted. We're kind of sheltering in place here, right, in Los Angeles, trying to stay out of the plague here. So
yeah,
I can't.
We are too.
Yeah, it's the same with you guys, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Anyway, when you live in LA, you meet film people, and I eventually, a producer at Warner Brothers, Fred Weintraub, walked into a place I was selling my sculptures and bought one and had me over to Warner Brothers. He just finished producing Woodstock and hiring Marty Scorsese to edit it, and I eventually moved into his house. I need a place to live, so I was making my art, and Marty moved from New York to lived at Fred's house for a while, and it was an interesting house. Michael Wadley, the filmmaker, lived there for a while.
Oh wow!
Oh really?
That was a big kind of art thing. Meanwhile, I'm working in the office and I'm making my sculptures, and he's getting ready to produce Enter the Dragon, and but Marty was. I watched Marty in the house with Martic Martin, his writing partner, write Mean Streets. So, and they're showing, I'm borrowing my Bell and Howell from my mom to show Marty 16 millimeter movies. And, he's talking about his hopes and dreams here and whatnot. Eventually he finishes Mean Streets, and he tells me, and this is his exact words, quit doing that fucking art and come work on the movie with me. Cause he'd met an art director in Texas when he did, Roger Corman's Boxcar Bertha.
Yeah.
And he brought the Texas guy, a very nice guy named David Nichols, here to LA, but he didn't know LA. So Marty hired me, and I was assistant art director and the set dresser and the everything. So that was my first movie. I worked on Mean Streets.
Oh,
And,
so Mean Streets came before Invasion of the Bee Girls, or your uncredited or the Young Nurses, where you were where you had a part.
Yeah. Before I started doing all these Roger Corman ones, I did Marty's movie, and in fact, all that furniture, came out of my mom's house. We didn't have any money on the show, So I moved a 5-ton up to my mom's house in Encino here in the San Fernando Valley. I remember distinctly. She goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "I need all your furniture, Mom. We have no money." She said, "Well, I thought you were a gallery with sculptures for quite a bit of money, actually, at the time for a 20-year-old." But I said, "No, I'm in the film business now, Mom." She's like, "What?" So I took all her furniture. I still laugh about that when I see the movie. But anyway, so that got me going. And then the answer to your question is, if you live in Los Angeles, you just meet people that are in the business,
Right.
and they tell you, "Hey, you want to work on this thing?" And you go, "Well, yeah," and you don't get any money. But then something else happens, and they say, "Well, he's this guy," and then you work on that, and pretty soon you get $100. And
Yep.
I kind of think it's like that still in town here. I think I live at the Brewery Artist Lofts downtown in LA, and I'm surrounded by young filmmakers, and I think it's very much the same these days.
Well, I have 2 or 3 questions right in a row, but this one I want to so you didn't have maybe a love for film as you were growing up? There wasn't a movie that was like, I want to.
Oh, certainly. I like everybody. I just loved films. Watching them on TV. There was really no video market yet.
Yeah.
And I just watched The Late Show on the TV. It's very much what you'll hear Joe Dante say, and Marty will say. Everybody that loved films, the only outlet we had was late night, our local TV station playing old horror movies and old B movies and old, better movies. And I always loved movies, but I really had no illusion, that I would be in the film business. It just sort of happened.
Right.
Which I'm thankful for,
So I've got to ask, what's your best batshit Roger Corman story?
Oh my God.
There's so many.
I know there's so many. And we've talked to so many people. I've met Roger once. Actually, I got to meet Roger once, which was really cool. He barely talked to me, which is fine. I wouldn't have talked to me either if I had a short film playing at a film festival. He had no desire to look at it.
Right.
But he did acknowledge my existence, which I really appreciated.
Right.
And he was a gentleman.
I had dinner with he and Julie at this producer's house I just mentioned. My mentor and boss, Fred Weintraub, it was about 3 years ago, I think. And God, I was sitting across. There's just 6 of us, me and my girlfriend and Roger and Julie and Fred and his wife. And my God, I'm looking at him. He looked younger than me. That man is not aging. It's really weird.
I know. He was Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's like Joe Dante. Joe Dante isn't aging. At Corman, I met all these people. If you worked at New World Pictures back in the day, I did 10 pictures for Roger in various capacities. Prop master on a couple, stunt guy on one, art director on a few, and it was our film school. But Ron Howard was in there, and one day I met him in the hallway. He says, "Bill, you want to do this Eat My Dust thing? I'm trying to do this movie, and I need." And I said, "Oh God, I'm not. I'm gonna do this werewolf movie." I was about to do The Howling, and and they, "Oh, okay." And then you run into somebody else, and they're all there. Jonathan Kaplan and Marty had been there, and Joe Dante was still editing trailers, and
he and Alan.
And Alan, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So it was really I just went to a screening of at the Egyptian Theater on Hollywood Boulevard with John Sayles and Joe Dante, and they were on stage. There was a double bill. What a great double bill of Piranha and The Howling.
Oh my God!
It was packed with people, and John was talking about writing these movies, and Joe, who's people love Joe, and you know why. I mean, he just loves film, and he has such a great storyteller.
Mm-hmm.
And up on stage, what both he and John agreed about, in the sort of the dialogue between films, was working for Roger. as harrowing as it was, financially speaking, is he let you do your thing.
Right.
All you had to do was come in on budget.
Right.
And Joe quoted Roger, and I'd heard this before. He quoted Roger as saying, "Look, if you do 2 pictures for me that get released and make money, you'll never have to work for me again." And I thought that was so true as when Joe said it, because you've established that you can make a movie on a budget, and then people start looking at you, you know, regular studios and better people. So everybody agreed that, contrary to what some of our memories are about how harrowing it was, and like 1 day to edit a scene and 3 days to, you know, wrap the thing.
Right.
They have fond memories of the whole thing, as do I. I really do. I mean, it was, you know, there's no money, and you know, you're eating on the street, and somebody will throw you a pizza, and you know, you're asked to do a lot of stuff. I mean, one day there was no stuntmen, so I said, "Well, I'll do the stunt." So I did a stunt. You know,
Yeah.
Another day.
What stunt did you do? I gotta ask about that stunt. What did you do?
It's funny. I ran into Joe right after Candy Striped Nurses was released. I worked on Candy Striped Nurses. I'm looking at the posters right now.
Oh,
I worked
man.
on Young Nurse, Candy Striped Nurses. What's one more too?
That must have been a terrible job with a horrible view.
Well, what they did for me is, this is typical Corman. They set up they asked me, I was working on Rock and Roll High School for a couple of days. We're all sharing all these movies, you know?
Yeah.
So someone said, "Hey, can you make us a breakaway bench and a thing and a break? We have a stunt, and we're going to do it off Sunset Boulevard in the middle of the night. And these crazy Candy Striped Nurses are in a car, and they're all drunk, and they almost roar down a guy." So I said, yeah, I'll do it. So I made I've always had a wood shop. I've always been a woodworker. So I built them a couple of benches and a breakaway pole and a breakaway this and all this stuff. So I go out there, set up the gag on the middle. We didn't even have permits, right? Off of Sunset. So then they got 4 cameras, stunt coordinator, and somebody like Julie Corman or something has forgotten to call the stunt guy. So they had no stunt guy to sit on the bench. So I go, I'll sit on the bench, you know? So here comes this car, and the stunt guy's blowing his whistle, but I can see the car out of the corner of my eye, and I jump up right at the last minute. Car smashes everything. I dive between the cameras, and I think the coordinator almost had a heart attack.
Oh.
But I ran into Joe at a party a few months after. He cut that trailer, and I was watching TV the day before, and I'd seen myself in the trailer for Candy Striped Nurses. I go, "Hey, I'm in the trailer." And he goes, "It was the only decent thing in the whole movie because it's such a harrowing scene. I'll send it to you, Joe, if you want me to. I'll send it to crack up." But I mean, you had to be a multitasker when you're working for Roger. You know, you're art director one day, you're prop master the next, then you're building a set, and then you're an actor. I'm an actor in another one. I'm an ambulance driver, and I drop a body, and you know, Dick Miller is always in the scene. And,
Right.
You know. Yeah. It was just great fun. Great fun. I look back on it.
We did a whole episode on Dick Miller, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. Isn't that? Yeah. Joe almost teared up when he was talking about Dick at this last Egyptian theater thing last month. You know, they were really close. You know, like all interesting directors, they keep a kind of their gang of actors around their you know, their repertory company.
Yeah.
And so I think that's sweet. I saw him. I worked on Small Soldiers. He was there, you know, one of Joe's pictures, and he was in every one of the, like, I'm looking at I have all my posters up in my studio here. I did a movie, Big Bad Mama, with Angie Dickinson, and Dick was a detective back in the Roaring '20s, and you know, then I'm looking at another Cloris Leachman, Crazy Mama. I did that. I was a prop master on that, and that was Jonathan Demme directing that, and Dick was in that. Was another G-Man or something, so he's in everything.
Well, I have one. Go ahead, Chad.
Well, no. So the third bonehead who could not make it today, since you mentioned it, he requested, pleaded with us to get a Big Bad Mama story from you. So I didn't know if you had any fond memories of Big Bad Mama.
Oh yeah, I really had a great time. I have a wonderful, one of the only autographed pictures I've ever gotten from anybody. All the actors I've met over my life, from Angie Dickinson. She was just so sweet, and just loved her. I drove her home. She was living with Burt Bacharach. We were shooting down in Paris, down here. She was living there, and then no one would drive her home. So this was before Policewoman, I think. She was kind of in between, before
right.
he'd hit big again, and
right.
And actually, William Shatner's in it too,
Right.
Well,
Tom
that's
Skerritt, William Shatner.
Yeah, that's
and William Shatner was between gigs too. Star Trek didn't do too well. And, it was a little dicey for him. So they were all doing these B movies for Roger Corman.
Well, the third bonehead who's not here is a huge Trekkie. We all love Trek, but he's a huge Trekkie.
Mm-hmm.
And oddly enough, of all of us who have met Shatner, I'm the only one who doesn't have a bad story and had a wonderful time. So there you go.
I never really had I was right by them too, because I kind of really enjoyed doing props. Once I was in the business, I kind of thought it's kind of fun when you're the prop master, because you're right there by the actors. Everybody. They chat you up. But it's like not when you're kind of remote when you're an art director and you're, off preparing the set for the next week or something, and you're never really get to know anybody, like you do when you're right there lighting their cigarette and handing them a gun and all that kind of stuff. He was great. He was a little fussy, and he was worried about his toupee, and he was, worried about this and that. But I can't speak bad of the guy. I like him. I like those shows he does when he walks in his house. What's that show that he does where he looks at weird things? He says, "Can you believe it?" He did it for about 3 seasons.
I don't know that I'm familiar with that one. There's
cool.
been so many shows with Shatner.
I know. I think he's back going to do another thing too about occult things or paranormal type things.
Yeah,
right.
He's so funny. I think my nephew's a cinematographer. He just shot a commercial with him, and he liked him. He was thrilled to meet William Shatner.
Yeah.
Who wouldn't be? He was in. Have you ever seen the stuff he did? I did the movie Airplane 2.
Oh, we're going to ask you about.
We're going to ask about
Airplane 2. It's highlighted, sir. In fact, that's my. Before we get to Airplane 2, I have to ask you a question about a movie you worked on called Dead and Buried.
Oh yeah.
Now I know it's Gary Sherman, but it's written by someone whom I never got to meet, but I'm fascinated by, Dan O'Bannon.
Ron Shusett.
Yeah, and Ron Shusett.
Dan O'Bannon, yeah.
But I'm more fascinated with Dan O'Bannon than I am Ron. Does that make sense?
That's weird. Not weird. I never met Dan.
Oh, you never met Dan?
Ron. I never did. I knew Ron because he was hanging around that set for Dead and Buried. And then I got to know Shusett real well on Total Recall, because we were, down in Mexico for months and months and months and months and months. But I really don't know Dan O'Bannon.
Okay. I was just curious.
Obviously, a super talented guy.
He was
that
very
movie.
Yeah, he's a very
that
out
movie
there.
Scary.
Right. It's a really good movie. Chad, have you ever seen Dead and Buried? You should really check it out.
I've seen it a long time ago.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yes. And it holds up well, actually. After all this.
It does hold. I saw it. Somebody had showed it to me last year, and I hadn't seen it in years and years. And it's Jack Albertson's last film too.
Right.
He does a great role as that crazy crematory. What is he? When you take care of the bodies and whatnot.
Oh, the Undertaker. Yeah.
Undertaker. That's a creepy. We shot it up north in Mendocino. Where they shot the birds, and then we shot big sets here at the Sam Goldwyn Studios. I built a whole big crazy mortuary for him. But that's a creepy story. I remember being real creeped out on that show. It was. Stan Winston did the effects, some of his first effects. It was an interesting crew, and people don't know about Dead and Buried. I'm surprised you guys know. Well, you're film guys. So
we're such huge nerds, physically and literally. You can follow me on Facebook and Twitter to see that. I'm a big dude, and I've had the fortune of I call it a side gig. We all three of us work in higher education. We work for universities, so our side gigs are kind of this stuff here. So we've had. So let me move on to a movie that No, it's not fantastic, and it has and it's unfortunate because it's a sequel to a fantastic movie. But I think it is too much maligned because I think there's some great stuff in Airplane 2, the sequel.
There is, Now,
once again, another great performance by Bill Shatner.
He is so funny in that scene as the commander of that moon base.
Oh, he's fucking hilarious.
He's hilarious in that gag. And I prepped for 3 months on Airplane 1,
really?
over at Paramount.
Yeah.
Oh, with Howard Koch. I knew the Zuckers real well because John Davidson, their producer, was an old friend from
Corman.
Roger Corman. Yeah,
right.
I mean, John was head of production for quite a while for Roger. And so I worked on it. We did all the sets to test all the actors. Julie came in and, we tested a lot of people. And then they put in turnaround, and they weren't going to do it. I think the budget was like $800,000 or something, and Paramount got cold feet, or I don't know what the whole issue was. So I went and did another film called The Serial from a best-selling book by Sarah McFadden, which was great. We built all this. We filled up Paramount with all these great sets. So I missed it. All of a sudden they greenlit it again. I couldn't do it. So then when Koch was going to do Airplane 2, I jumped on it. I know the Zuckers hate that and have never seen it. And, Abrams, I did work again for Jim Abrams, so on Big Business, the Bette Miller, Lily Tomlin movie. So I guess there was no hard feelings, but I know that they did not like that whole thing. But that movie is very, very funny.
Agreed.
I swear to God, it got me so much, but it's a funny movie. There's a lot of good gags in there.
The problem is that it's a sequel to Airplane.
Nothing's funnier than Airplane. You're right. There's no funnier movie really than Airplane.
No, to me, there's 3 or 4 great, and it's probably, I'm out of, let's see, I'm trying to think of Marx Brothers. My favorite one is, it's not Duck Soup. Horse Feathers is my favorite. So everybody's got a favorite Marx Brothers film. And then there's Blazing Saddles for me, and then there's Airplane. And
I love Blazing.
Right? You just can't do sequels to those things because they are iconic. You just can't. But I feel Airplane 2 has a lot of funny shit in it that no one ever sees or gives credit to.
I know. Well, people are very loyal to Airplane 1. And once the word got out, I suppose that David and Jerry Zucker were never going to see it. And we're very disappointed that Paramount was going ahead with 1. And, the film fans are extremely loyal, as better than any, and if you sense that there's that's why they all the studios send out these trailers on social media, and the moment there's a squawk from a film fan club, they go back and re-edit. They change the dialogue, they change the look, they change something because they don't want to mess with these big, powerful groups of fans out there, which I think is as it should be,
Right. Now, I guess it's worked sometimes, but I'm always about, I'd rather see an interesting train wreck than a very vanilla movie.
Well, yeah, if something gets watered down to the point that it's pointless, yeah, absolutely, sure.
We do see a lot of that.
Yeah, no, there's all these horror stories of, I follow Cecil's show, Good Bad Flicks, a lot. And I think he does the best show on YouTube about, going behind the scenes and talking about films. He's a lover of bad Philippine films made in Philippines, bad horror movies from the 80s and 90s. And actually, he's done, I collaborated with him on a Hocus Pocus one and a Nothing But Trouble, a movie I did for Dan Aykroyd.
Well, it's on our list. We got to talk about this one before this show's over with, sir.
Oh, yeah.
You're not leaving until we talk about Nothing But Trouble.
Okay. But he also is very vocal about test screenings and how they've ruined movies that he's loved.
Right.
Like two people in some test screening in some podunk town changed the whole direct. And he's obviously doing his homework and talking to editors and directors, and they've seen their movie just taken away from them and ripped apart because of some bad test cards with a bunch of yahoos that aren't even the audience, perhaps, for what that movie is supposed to be aiming at,
Absolutely.
So it's true what you're saying.
Let's talk about Paul Verhoeven for a second. We'll just go chronologically. I don't know how much you have time, but I want to hit a lot of the important ones. Okay.
Sure.
So Paul Verhoeven, out of all the filmmakers I would love to meet that I've never met, he may be in the top at least 2 or 3.
Right.
I just, his excitement just to watch the behind the scenes of him directing.
Yeah.
It had to be crazy, but yet contagious.
Yeah, it is. Now, I'll tell you, when he first came, I got hired on Robocop. John Davidson hired me on Robocop before Paul got hired, and Rob Bottin was already hired and working on needed such a lot of lead time to sort of develop this Robo suit.
Mm-hmm.
But John was waiting for Paul. This is when I first saw. This is why I'm not producer material, because John was telling me every day I'm going, John, every director in town, just get one and let's shoot this, because to tell you the truth, I wasn't that impressed with the script. I was already, I'm a comic book fan from way back, and I had all my Robotech already. I had a lot of Robo stuff around me in my comic books.
Wow.
And I just thought, John, get Jonathan Kaplan to shoot it for you. Get somebody, everybody, get somebody.
Mm-hmm.
He said, no, I'm waiting for this Dutch director. And I'd seen Soldier of Orange.
Yeah.
That's about it. I hadn't seen Spetters or Turkish Delights, but he showed me those movies in our screening room over at, I don't know, where, Carolco, or where were we? I'm not sure where we were.
Robocop would have been in MGM, wasn't it?
No, it's MGM now, but Carolco made it.
Okay.
No, Carolco made Total Recall.
Yeah.
Who made? Where were we?
But you would
but
know
I'm
more
wondering
than I would.
No. I get my. It's the only picture I've ever worked on where I got profit participation.
Oh.
I have a half a point Robocop.
Whoa.
Hey. If you're going to make one, that's not a bad one to get profit participation on, right?
Yeah, I just got a check from MGM a couple of days ago, a couple of $1,000 check,
Yeah.
And it's just amazing, to see. It's a little picture that just made so much money they just couldn't hide it, So everybody made a lot of.
And Robocop was Orion, by the way.
Is it Orion? I'm so sorry.
Orion. So we're in the Orion offices, and they're near Carolco, or were near Carolco. That's why I'm getting that confused. But anyway, I see the power of the producer. He waited for Paul, and he wanted to not do the thing that I was saying to him to do. Let's just shoot this and get going here. He saw something different, and I just think John's still a wonderful friend of mine, and I see him a couple times a year still, and he waited for Paul, and Paul came, and, we started, he naturally, Paul's fessed up what a terror he was, and, how tough he was to work around, because he hated the American crews. He never worked this way in Europe,
Yeah.
He hated Rob Bottin. He hated me, hated everybody, and, but he saw all the work we turned out, all the crew I brought down to Texas and Pittsburgh, and all the Texas crew that were terrific.
Yeah. So a friend of ours. Oh, Chad, do you want to go ahead?
No. I was just going to say about working on RoboCop. So Joe could ask about, were you there when the guy got blown up by Ed 209? Were you there when the RoboCop took off his face mask? But I want to know, sir, were you there during the famous story from Miguel Ferrer and Kurtwood Smith about the bitches?
Well, I was there for that scene. I don't know. I don't know the story, but it's funny because I dressed that set. I was right there with the decorator, when he says, "Get out, bitches." But what is the story? I'm curious.
Joe, I don't know if I can do it justice enough, but it's in one of the special editions of RoboCop. It's Miguel Ferrer and Kurtwood Smith. They're interviewing them separately, and they're telling this story, and they keep cutting back intervally into their story because they are so well synced about. It's Paul Verhoeven, and who else is it, Joe? The cinematographer.
Would that have been Jan de Bont?
Joost Vakana.
Or Joost Vakana?
No, Joost Vakana. Yeah.
Somebody,
Okay.
are the
Those
bitches in place? No, the bitches are in place. The bitches should be here. Should the bitches be here? Should the bitches be over there? What should the bitches be?
Yeah,
And they just
yeah,
they don't refer to them by name. They just keep calling them
yeah.
the
No,
bitches.
no. I vaguely remember that was the thing, and I, oh man, oh my God, that Robo. First of all, it was freaking humid in Dallas, and we were
Yep.
building all these huge sets around Dallas. With the F studios there, and we're building on the streets. We were building sets. We were, Rob got there late with his Robo costume, and Peter couldn't get in it. And
Right.
I mean, you've probably heard so many of these stories, but it was so hot and humid. I mean, we were on the news every night. We were blowing something up. Every night we make the news because we were all over town shooting in Deep Ellum, their old section in Dallas there, blowing up buildings, driving cars into things. And, we blew up that gas station, when Robo walks through the fire.
Right.
There was a freeway right there. And then we hadn't closed down the freeway. I mean, there was shrapnel. I'm talking about a shrapnel like the size of bumpers on a car falling on the film where I was standing there, but near Yost. I mean, it was unreal what we were doing. And, but it's, like they say, it's all on the, it's all there on the screen.
Yeah. Well, a friend of the show, he's a makeup artist. I don't know if you know him. His name's Bart Mixon.
Oh, I recognize the name. Was he one of the gun guys, or was he a armor, or?
No, he actually, I think he put the suit on, Peter. Did he not after a while, Chad?
Yeah, he put the suit. He put the suit on.
He put the suit after a while.
So he was working for Rob. Is that who he was?
Yeah. He was a Texas guy who got connected with him and ended up working with Rob. Yeah, I can't remember who the other person is. Bill, I'm sorry about that. I should have went back and believe it or not, you probably don't watch a ton of your movies. I actually don't listen to a ton of these episodes after we do them. After I get them. So I have no desire to listen to my voice. But anyway, what Bart Mixon talked about it as well, and he had a lot of interesting stories about Peter Weller and the girls. And if you ever get a chance, I'll tell you what, I'll send you a link to that later on. And if you get a chance to just maybe, if you don't want to listen to the whole thing, you can at least fast forward to the Robocop thing. So maybe you can get a different perspective of it that summer. Go ahead.
There was a film crew that came not this year, last year, at the end of last year.
Yeah.
Not this last year before. They're trying to doing a documentary on Robocop. They're this British crew that did a great one on I forget, some other horror movie. They got us all. They interviewed us all.
Yeah.
Except for Rob. Rob's missing in action. He won't come anywhere and do anything. But they got Paul. Yeah. They got Ed Newmeyer. They got me. They got the decorator. They got all the actors. And we're waiting for this. Now, the thing that happened, I saw the writer or the producer at Monsterpalooza 6 months ago. And he was sitting there with the actor Ray. The guy that played one of the bad guys, Ray.
Ray Wise. Ray Wise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who, by the way, doesn't look a day older than when I saw him. So he and I were chatting, and I realized that was this producer that I'd met like a year before. I said, "Where's our documentary on Robocop?" They ended up shooting so much footage because they weren't just doing it on Robo. It was Robo 2, Robo 3, the Robo TV show, the Robo. Right. Much Robo. And he said, we got so bogged down. We have so much material. I'm going, damn, you should have just focused on just the first one, or maybe the first and the second one.
Right.
He said, well, it's supposed to be out soon. So I'm sure, like Ray Wise was sitting there. We told 15 war stories right there while this producer grabbed his pad and started writing them down, because there's so many funny stories of all of us doing this, almost like a $13 million movie or $12 million movie, in the middle of Dallas. With this robot walking around. It was pretty crazy.
So were you there the day the Robocop car showed up? The bad
Robocops?
Yeah, because they switched from one car to the other, because John Davidson had a car built, right? That was kind of like the Robo Cruiser or what have you.
Yeah, the producer, there was a producer on before I got hired.
Okay.
Arnie Schmidt. Good guy, Arnie.
Uh-huh.
And he'd already contracted out these futuristic cop cars to this flamboyant car designer on Hollywood Boulevard, Jay something or other.
Yeah.
Who had the world's longest limo with a hot tub in the back, and a helicopter landing pad on top. But they said, go over and see how he is. Now they'd already spent $170,000 on this guy, and I mean, everybody thought they were all going to get fired. Like Orion was going to put the hammer down just because of that bad mistake. Because I went over, the guy didn't have a drill press, the guy didn't have any painting equipment. He was a complete phony.
Oh, wow.
So I go back, I tell everybody this, and I've got some funny couple of pictures of Paul over with those cars in shock. And we go,
I would love to see that.
We go, what are we going to do? And I said, well, these cars cannot be saved. We can blow them up, which we did. We eventually put them on the street in Deep Ellum, and those are the cars that get blown up. We went to Gene Winfield, who is a fantastic, real Hollywood car designer, and he did the SUX, the SUX. And he did a beautiful car that we used, that looked like it was a car. Well, it's still around. It's actually a lot of auto shows, along with the Blade Runner cars. But that was catastrophic. So eventually we had to go down to Dallas. I found a flood-damaged Taurus's, which was, it actually was the Motor Trend Car of the Year a couple of years running when I got them, and they'd been flood-damaged, all these Tauruses. So I bought them cheap, and I sprayed them. I sprayed them satin black.
Oh, okay.
And they were the only car actually we could find that could fit the robot in it. If Peter got in there with half his costume on, he could, drive that car. It's in fact, I ended up buying a new one for my wife because it's such a cool car that I love those cars. But that was a big catastrophe. That was right out of the blocks. That was a big waste of money.
Yeah.
Okay. Too bad, because that movie didn't have a lot of money to waste.
Right. I'm sorry, Chad, you had a question? Okay. So moving right along, so you must have got along well enough with Verhoeven to move on to do Total Recall.
Well, yeah, he saw that I'll tell you, well, he saw that everybody worked their ass off. He was just, he's a European director, and he has a very much this auteur European way of doing things where he's the master of all the lands. Everybody else is just there to please him. And of course, that's not the way Hollywood works. There are really interesting artists that work to, bring a director's vision there, but these are bigger. This is a bigger Robocop, as little as it was the biggest film Paul had ever done, you know, let alone something way out of his normal comfort zone. He had big, terrible fights with Rob, tried to change Rob's Robocop, trying to sort of manipulate everything when he needed to focus just on directing the film.
Right.
But he didn't know any of us. He didn't know how to work in the United States. And I think he saw, I'll tell you one thing. I walked out of the screening room at Orion the first time we saw a rough cut of Robocop, and I was in shock. I did not believe how good it was.
Really?
I mean, I was stunned. I could not believe that this is this sort of comic book kind of lightweight film that I first approached it as. And then I saw what Paul did to this picture, and I could not believe it. It was amazing. And I think Paul saw all the hard work that all of us did. We got to be good friends. He would come over. I had a ranch out in the valley, my wife and I. He'd come over horseback riding and hang out. We got to be friends. And then one day he comes over and he says, do you want to go? I just had a baby. He says, do you want to go away and do a picture on Mars? I'm thinking like, oh, God, no, with Verhoeven away on Mars.
Right.
But of course, to work for Paul again, and it had so much design work in it. You'd have to you wouldn't be able to call yourself a production designer if you didn't want to jump on something like this. So yeah, Paul got me. I got my decorator back. Rob Bottin signed back up. Yost came back from Germany, and we all went to. It was like 9-10 months of my life, on that picture, almost 11 months on that picture. That was a lot of work. Paul and I really worked hard. He's so funny in the trailer, in some of the behind the scenes stuff. He always talks about us wrestling with these problems. but we did the most amazing sets for him, and he's something to work for. I'll tell you that. He asked me to do Basic Instinct later on, and he asked me to do Showgirls, but I was always involved in something else, so I couldn't really.
You missed out on Showgirls, though.
Thank God I was on something else.
Well,
do you find it disturbing that so not bad mouthing Paul Verhoeven, but do you find it disturbing that Showgirls has become the cult classic that it is?
It is a cult. It is a cult classic. I understand that. Yeah, I was doing. I did 4 pictures for Wolfgang Peterson, and I was doing over at Sony. I was doing Air Force One over there.
Yeah.
And Paul was doing Starship Troopers, in the other part of the studio. And the decorator was the decorator I had on Total Recall was working for Paul on that one, and I had a different decorator on the Air Force One. But every day I would see Paul walking up the studio, cursing, like going to lunch or going to dailies. He would grab me. I'd walk with him for like half a mile across the studio, yelling at me. I'm not even on the show, right? Yelling at me about how inept Sony is and never use Sony special visual effects. Never do this. And I'm thinking, I'm nodding and doing whatever I can to, walk along and support him. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, I'm so glad I'm going to walk over to our stage where Wolfgang Peterson is. And Wolfgang's not going to be yelling and screaming like that. I have to say, that crossed my mind.
Well, we had the production manager, right, Chad?
Mm-hmm.
For Showgirls and Starship Troopers, and he told some fantastic stories on Paul. And actually, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Anyway, one of the best stories actually was about Crusade that he never even got to make.
Wow. And
for Carolco, which is and thank goodness they stopped him several different times. And even the production manager, I won't say his name, but if you watch the show or listen to the show, you can find out. But he even said that yes, it was very good that they pulled at the last moment they pulled the funding from Verhoeven, because the amount of horses just exponentially rose every week. It's like, well, we only need 100. Well, now we're going to need 400. Well, now we're going to need the whole army.
Right. Well, this is the thing that happened to Paul, and it's happened to other directors. I mean, I've walked by Walter Hill. I was sharing an office next to Walter Hill about 10 years ago, and I'm talking to him all the time, and I'm like, God, you're Walter Hill. You can't get a job? He said, no, nobody will hire me. I mean, these directors, and it happened to Paul, he had about $400 million pictures pulled at the last minute.
Yeah. Because
he could not get them going. And once that happened, he had to go back to, Germany and make movies, or go back to, and it's tough. He was always trying to do it his way, and it just didn't work out,
Right.
So since you mentioned it, I do have to ask, how is Walter Hill? Because I mean, again, another iconic person in our spectrum of nerdiness.
Yeah, I don't know him that well, but just sharing the office next to him, he was trying to get things going. Now, this is 10 years ago, 12 years ago, and I just mentioned that to make the point that these icons, to me and you, it's hard to find work. They'd rather pay less money for a younger director and surround him with a ton of notes and a ton of people,
right,
and hope that he doesn't goof it up. And boy, when they goof it up, you see it. You hear about it. Pictures close down all the time because things got out of hand and whatnot. But that was the business model, is hire some hot young director who's never really done anything, maybe one small film, but all of a sudden they're doing it. Well, the $100 million films we're talking about are now $200 million films.
Right.
Boy, if one thing's wrong, it's catastrophe.
Yeah. Right. So speaking of catastrophe, let's talk about Chad. Do you want to ask him about it? Because
we have to. So another one of these films that is an art lexicon, and it's a cult classic, but Nothing But Trouble. I mean, we love Nothing But Trouble. I watch it at least once a year, sometimes more.
I don't watch it once a year, but
I do.
I will say this. I'm 40. I just turned 42. And right around that time, my parents split up. And we've talked about this on the show before. There was about a 2-year span there where little Joe was dropped off 11, 12, 13 years old at the movies every weekend. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And one big weekend, it was either King Ralph or Nothing But Trouble. And little Joe had to see Nothing But Trouble because of Dan Aykroyd, right? Dan Aykroyd and John Candy, especially because of the Blues Brothers and Ghostbusters. Had to see Nothing But Trouble. Yeah. So I saw it opening weekend. I was there for you all opening weekend, little Joe by himself.
And my story real quick, Bill, about this is mine is completely different. So there was a small, tiny little video rental store in Frankfort, Kentucky called Box Office Video. And every Friday, my dad would take us to rent 4 or 5 movies to keep us occupied throughout the weekend.
I remember those Fridays very well.
Yes, and I would just go through the aisles trying to find something that I'd never seen before. My brothers would always go to the low-budget action films. I was trying to find something, and I ran into this movie called Nothing But Trouble, and I looked at the cover, and it was Chevy Chase, Dan Aykroyd, and John Candy. How come I've never seen this movie?
Right.
And I pulled it out.
Demi Moore.
And Demi Moore.
Yeah.
And Digital Underground.
Well, this was what's so weird to me. This was at the time at the studio was a $50 million movie. Now that's 100 today, right?
Yeah.
And it just had, they were always yelling at me, the studios. I think I wrote that the other day about something. Joe, you may have seen it on my site. But
you comment about Nothing But Trouble quite a bit, and I always love them. I always love it.
Well, it just somehow it just popped up a bunch of stuff. So I said, well, I'll better comment on it. But they're treating it. See, they have big problems. They were doing Bonfire of the Vanities, Warner's in New York, and it was terrible. This is my own personal opinion. I don't know if this is true, but they were having terrible problems on that film. It's loaded with problems.
Yeah.
Well, it didn't turn out good, and it was problematic, and that was their big picture. We were the little picture at Warner's, and there was nothing else shooting. So kind of the Eye of Mordor was on New York. And it was a little bit off us because we filled all the lots, all the stages with these crazy sets. Yeah. And then they kept yelling at me, "Oh, Bill, you're our B picture. You're not our big picture. Why are you spending all this money?" I'm like, Demi Moore had just done Ghost. She was hot as a pistol. Chevy Chase was their big, I think he got $5 million, $6 million at the time. He was the big star at Warner's. You got Dan Aykroyd, who everybody loved, and John Candy, who everybody loved. So I'm thinking, and I told them a number of times. In fact, Dan heard that once in an outer office, and that bonded us forever, man. I said, this is not a little picture to me. This is a big picture to me. And boy, does the director like to hear that from somebody on the picture. But yeah, I got hired. Somebody recommended me to Dan, and he hired me right away. He saw my crazy sculptures, and we just had to me, he's the coolest guy I ever met. I would walk, and by the way, I'm speaking for the entire. I mean, I would walk on my knees to work for Dan, a mile, because of course he'll never be given a chance to direct again. But he was just such a cool guy. He is so cool,
and he has such a unique vision too.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's so funny, and he's so cool, and he's so nice. It's just, and everything I like. I ran into his daughter Daniela. She has a place out in the desert right next to mine. Beautiful trailer that she hangs out sometimes. And we talk about this. She says, my dad still talks about you, Bill, at the table. I still got all those squeeze toys in my garage. She says, Daniela, she's like 26 or something. I go, Daniela, I used to hold you as a little baby, when you're on the set. She said, oh my God. But I mean, Dan loves ghosts and paranormal stuff. I do. He's a big UFO buff. I am.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it was a match made in heaven, for Dan and I. But when it came out, I think it was like $500 per screen, like almost unheard of for a major motion picture to open with that low a screen haul, and it disappeared right away. Now the crew all went to the screening. We loved it. It's like a home movie to us because all our artwork is there. The whole thing is an art project, really. Yeah, there's some actors running around, but it's an art project for the art department. We loved it,
And honestly, that's what so the performances, yes, but the sets are fantastic. I mean, the courtroom, the outside, the conveyor belt that Demi Moore and Chevy Chase go through, all of it is just stunningly beautiful.
Roller coasters through the house. We had Michael Lantieri. I got Michael to do it, you know, on loan from Steven Spielberg, you know, had done all Steven's movies. Lantieri was on that. We loved it. You know, somebody would pitch an idea and he'd go, I can do that. So I'd go buy a roller coaster and Michael would re-weld it. So it went through my set on location. So we'd say, well, I wanted to chew up with it. Okay, Mike would just hire, you know, we never stopped. We had all the money and the people to do this amazing, weird thing, which is, I still to this day, except for the Bonfire of Vanities concept of mine, I do not know why the studio didn't put the brakes on us, but they didn't. And although they eventually renamed the movie was called Vulcanvania,
right?
And when they released it, they renamed it Nothing But Trouble.
So
Dan hated that.
Well, let me ask you. So how much? So very little. How much of that is in the script, and how much was just made on the spot? You're talking about just making shit up as you went. So how little of that is in the script?
A lot of stuff. Most of it's in the script.
Okay.
Absolutely. Most of the stuff was written by Dan and his. I don't know if he wrote it with his brother.
I think he wrote it with his brother. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he did write a lot of it with his. But there's another name floating around that I can't think of. But yeah, all of that was in the script. But, you know, you could go up to him and say, you know, it'd be great if we did. Oh, okay, let's do that. You know, he was very open to, you know, suggestions, which, of course, is always a fun director to work for, you know, when you're an effects guy or an art department guy or, you know, a prop guy. You know, we went, there's a big swap meet in Pasadena, very famous at the Rose Bowl.
Yeah.
And Dan and I went a number of times shopping for set dressing. You know, I'd check out $10,000, $20,000 sometimes from the studio.
Uh-huh.
And I'd walk, get this for the most swap meeting fun you can ever have. Dan would dress up so he thought nobody would know him, in his boots and his big butt and his army pants and his, like a biker silk scarf on and a Mountie hat. And I would put the swing gang, the crew on for a Sunday. You know the studio loved that, and they'd be standing out in the parking lot with a 5-ton truck, and Dan and I would walk through the whole thing, picking out set dressing for the judges, his character's room. And then the moment I would pick a chair or Dan would pick something, somebody out at me, they wouldn't follow us because we didn't want to know, you know, if there was a bunch of people with us. They'd come and grab it and take it away. It was so much fun hanging out with him. God, I just love it.
Yeah.
I went into the first one last story, if you don't mind.
No, please.
Tell as many stories as you want, sir.
We're big fans.
It just amuses me because we're all out on the Warner Ranch and we dug moats and I built this 90-foot house and there was stacks of cars and mufflers and junk as far as you can see, and things were on fire and earthquakes, and Lantieri had rigged everything. So it's the first day of shooting out there on this set. And first day of shooting all over, we started there, and then the stages were still being finished. So all the trailers are out there. So I see a walkie-talkie goes off on an assistant director near me, and it's Dan. And it goes, the guy walks up to me, assistant director, assistant, or whatever, and says, Bill, Dan wants to see you in his trailer right away. So I go, oh God, now what can it be? The first day of shooting, oh my God, hope everything's cool. So I knock on his trailer, come in. So I go in. The whole place, he's been smoking, right? The whole place is like weed. I'm getting a contact high going in there. And he says, I said, what's up, Dan? Everything cool? We got to start shooting, man. Everything's good. We're good to go, right? He's like, I just wanted to ask you something. He says, how do I look? This is what I'm going to wear. Does a director look like this? And I'm looking at him. He had biker boots, shorts on, army shorts, biker boots, no laces, a disco shirt on, a silk disco shirt with a kind of some scarf around, and a Mountie's hat on. And he says, how do I look? I said, you look great, man. Let's make this movie. He goes, I knew you'd like it. we walked out of the trailer, like all the assistant directors are huddled around going, oh my God, I hope there's no problem. Oh my God, I hope there's no problem. And he comes out and we started directing the picture. I just thought that was so funny. that he's like that. You know, I just love him. I just love the guy, to tell you the truth. I just love the guy.
He's definitely
over the years, I've seen him over the years, not very often, but once in a while, every 2 or 3, 4 years, I see him in some social gathering, and I always call him the judge. Cracks up, you know, because he's always going to be the judge, you know.
Right. So there, and I may be remembering this wrong, and it's been a couple of years since I've seen it, and you and Chad can argue with me, but I think there's a scene cut out of the theatrical that ended up in the video where he takes his nose off and uses it as a dick.
No,
I
never saw that in any cut of it.
Okay, so where he urinates through his nose out.
No.
Okay. Well, then somewhere in my mind, it has been built into my mind over 30 years.
Man, I don't know. Your memory scares me.
Your parents were going through a separation. And you're under a lot of pressure. You were 13. You were under a lot of pressure.
Well, probably.
But that is that's a pretty funny scene when Chevy looks over and
yeah,
the nose is like that.
Yeah, it's a circumcised dick. Okay, all right.
That's the most disturbing case of Mandela effect I've ever heard in my life.
Well,
okay,
go ahead.
I posted some scenes on my Facebook page the other day because somebody was asking about Nothing But Trouble, so I posted some stuff.
Uh-huh.
And I was looking at that scene, and I was thinking, man, that's even weirder than I remember. It was a really, you know, and you know, Chevy Chase was just a real pill. He never got the script. He was fighting Dan the whole time, and you can tell it. He's so uninterested in the movie.
Yeah,
you know, he's kind of sleepwalking through it, not doing his $6 million Chevy Chase thing. You know, he had a big fight with Dan. That, you know, one day, something that just you never can happen. He was mad about something, dialogue or something, and right in the middle of the crew, Chevy starts yelling at Dan and screaming stuff like, "You're only making $2 million, I'm making $6 million." You know, really stupid bullshit stuff. And right in front of the crew, and like we're all looking at each other, and you know, we'd already all hated Chevy. We all hate Chevy. I hate that guy. Yeah. And you know, one of the effects guys looked at me because we loved Dan and would do anything for Dan. And he looked at me and said, "You know, if he ever yells at Dan again, I'm gonna drop a brick on his head." And the way he said it was like, "Ooh, okay," you know, because people did not appreciate. First of all, it's so unprofessional, you know, to have to. You don't do that. You and your director. And Dan just took it. He said, "Well, come on, we'll probably work this out, and let's go." You know, he's such a, you know, he was a good guy. You know, he handled it as best he could. But, you know, I lost a lot of respect for Chevy on that, man. I'll tell you.
There's a lot of stories about Chevy being like that, and it's.
Yeah, it's not the only story you've probably heard like that.
No, he threw actually on the set of Vacation. He threw a suitcase at Harold Ramis, who was directing at the time. From behind, Harold was behind the camera. He threw the suitcase at him.
Well, we'll look at the, you know, Saturday Night Live. He left like after the first year.
Yeah.
He immediately left. He jumped ship. Oh, I'm Chevy Chase. I'm gonna, you know, and he left everybody. And at the time, I remember thinking, "Hey, dude, you know, aren't you part of this deal?" But no, he wanted out. He wanted to, you know, and he made a lot of money. And I don't begrudge anybody making a lot of money. He's made some really good movies too. Mm-hmm. But I just really resented, you know, seeing that, having to see that, you know.
Right. Well, you would have think you'd be more respectful for him simply because I actually was going to ask about this and decided not to because you said you didn't want to go negative. I was going to ask about Chevy because you would have thought he'd been. They did Spies Like Us. They've known each other. They've been on Saturday Night Live together. That makes no sense.
I don't know. They probably ended up friends after this, and maybe that's just the way things are. But I've been on a lot of movie sets, and I've seen a lot of tempers explode. And this was a really petty kind of way to handle something like that. Yeah. You know, even in the best of films, there's going to be explosions. And, you know, this seemed like, well, anyway, that's the I remember that day very well. And there's a lot of people on that show that remember that well because we didn't want to see that or hear that, and we didn't need to hear that. And you know, anyway,
Well,
that's my
no,
Chevy story.
that's okay. So, well, I got to ask really quick, and I know it's not a genre film, but you did work with Jim Abrams, who was part of Zaz, and you got to work with
Yeah.
Bette Midler and Lily Tomlin. I mean, two of the funniest
Oh, that was
ladies of all time.
really a great picture. Have you guys seen Big Business?
Yeah,
Have you
I
ever
saw
seen
it.
the
Well,
movie?
of course, sir.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean that was really a fun. I love Jim. Jim is the nicest, sweetest guy, and I love Bette. And of course, Lily Tomlin is so sweet. She, I was at her show. She was doing her one-woman show at the time.
Uh-huh.
And what is it, Something of the Universe, or I
I'm
forget
not
what it
for
was
sure.
named, but
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time standing next to Lily because she was so worried about her performance, and she'd come back and she'd say, what'd you think? And I'd say, oh, you were great, Lily. And I don't know, for some reason, I'm the only guy that has nothing to do, once it's done, once the
Right.
set's done. So I was around talking to her and fussing with her, my ex-prop master. So I was fussing with her
Uh-huh.
keys and things and stuff she had. I haven't seen that movie in 20 years. I'd love to watch that movie again sometime. That was the first, Dean Cundy shot it. That was the first remote computer-driven camera work that we did.
Oh, because of
on that.
doubles. Yeah, yeah.
The special effects scene, I built a very tricky set there where walls were sliding as the camera was moving, and we were closing them up because we were looking into mirrors. So our walls had to be open to shoot it, but closed as we got the reflection. So we really worked out a pretty cool, I built a beautiful model of that. Dean and I worked out a pretty cool set for that. And we built a huge Plaza Hotel at Disney. It was kind of a funny time at Disney when we were there. It was just in the transition when Eisner hadn't moved over there, and Katzenberg, none of those guys had moved over from Paramount yet. And it was almost going to collapse. Disney was almost going to be sold off for parts. And, people still walked around with little brown shirts, little name tags from the department saying, hi, I'm Fred, and all that stuff. And we were the only feature film there shooting on their big stage. We built they took the Plaza Hotel I built and they took it down to Florida for a long time. It was a, kind of an attraction down there at Disney.
Was it on the behind the scenes lot, the behind the scenes lot tour you could do at, it used to be called MGM and now it's Hollywood Studios, right?
Yeah, I guess that's where it ended up. I never saw it, but people told me, oh, I saw your Plaza Hotel set and they have your name on the blueprints and everything's up. And I thought, Tom Cruise came in and shot Cocktail, his movie, right after that. They used the hotel set, and then it was just too beautiful and expensive to tear down. And then we shot in the real Plaza Hotel. We all had suites there. It was so nice. I had a lot of fun in New York shooting that movie.
I bet.
Yeah.
So how did you end up working with Wolfgang Peterson so often?
His regular production designer that he used, well, he never really had a regular one, but he had a woman that a production designer that worked for him in The Line of Fire.
Yeah.
And she was busy, and he was getting ready to do Outbreak. Held Copelson.
Yeah.
And producing, and they invited me over. Somebody recommended me, or maybe my agent. I was with David Gersh, was my agent, still is my agent.
Yeah.
And I walked in, and he was really leery of giving me the job. He interviewed me just like directors do, feeling me out about the script and whatnot. Because he said, you've done all these fantasy things, Bill. You like Hocus Pocus and Flintstones and Total Recall and Robocop. Can you do reality? And, and I like Outbreak. And I said, really, Wolfgang, I feel that reality is going to be easier on me. It's hard dreaming up these futuristic sets and, bringing a full scale live action cartoon to life and making sets like in Flint.
Right.
And I think that this would be great. So I got the job. So once we got that job, I was his guy for 4 pictures. We did Perfect Storm together and Airplane or Air Force One and Poseidon together. So 4 pictures. I love Wolfgang.
Go ahead.
He's the coolest. Wolfgang is so great to work for. Oh my God. And he attracts like the top cinematographers. I worked twice with Michael Ballhaus and twice with Steele, you know, who are at the top of their game, you know, and it's just an amazing group of people he puts together on his films.
What was your favorite experience out of those four?
I think Perfect Storm was fun, you know, from Sebastian Junger's book.
Yeah.
Wolfgang Loves the Sea, and we built all these big sets in Gloucester where the story takes place, and big sets for him on, you know, big boats on gimbals on the big Warner stage. I dug a hole, cost $1 million. I dug a big tank in there, and all these big gimbals and big boats rocking and rolling, and George Clooney flinging off things. And, you know, when Wolfgang does those, we close off the whole studio and rename it Wolfgang Peterson Boulevard, because we need all their big stages for all, because Wolfgang's great because he loves sets. He loves the real filmmaking. You know, he doesn't really want to go just shoot a mountain, you know, and then comp something in front of it, or shoot in front of a green screen, although we have plenty of green screen. He loves the traditional big scale movie making, when here's my set, you know, and he walks onto it and it's all lit and it's all ready, and the wind machines are there and the rain machines are there, and you know, he likes that whole stuff. And of course, that's talking any art department's language. We love that stuff.
Because
I have no interest in, I want to make things. I don't want to go to a bar. I want to make the bar.
Right.
I want to make it just the way I want it, you know. So he's a great guy to work for.
Yeah, and that's one of the, you mentioned that because that's one of the things I wanted to talk about, because when it came out at the time, Air Force One was huge. And that was one of the things that they talked about more than anything about that movie was Air Force One itself, and how great that set was and how much detail went into it, even the escape pod.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you know, it was interesting designing that. You know, that's proprietary information, you know, how that plane is really laid out. But there are ex-Secret Service agents that work as tech advisors that have been on the plane that can tell us a little bit about it. And I called Boeing, and my assistants did, and we talked to the people that built that 747 Air Force One, and some of them did say there was really an escape hatch and a pod-like thing in the back for safety, and which was, you know, important to our story. But, you know, I'll tell you a funny story. One afternoon, Wolfgang goes, "Don't do anything this weekend." I said, "Okay, well, what's up?" And he says, "Well, we're going to take the corporate jet, the Sony jet. We're going to fly to, I think it was Montana, and we're going to get on Air Force One so we can finally see it." Now, I was far into designing it, you know, I was a 200-foot set, all on 200-foot gimbal, and then all the interior that I built, helicopters and C-130s, and I had sets everywhere at Sony. Every stage was filled with these big sets. And I said, okay, I'd love to. So sure enough, we go down to Santa Monica, get on the corporate jet, boom, we land there, and it turned out Bill Clinton was there with Air Force One, and he was hanging out at Harrison Ford's ranch. I guess Harrison has a ranch out there. So they can't get Air Force One onto Harrison's thing, so they take Marine One, which is the big helicopter, you know, and they fly to Harrison's ranch. And so we wait. So we get off, and like, here comes, we're waiting for Harrison. He wanted to see the plane too. So sure enough, here comes Harrison flying his own plane, you know. He rolls up right next to Air Force One with all these Marines around. And, you know, the way Air Force One works, there's a branch of each service there, and they're all heavily armed. And like, it was Wolfgang, Michael Ballhaus, and me. And here comes Harrison, and we get on the plane. You know, Wolfgang's like, "Bring your camera." I said, "Wolfgang, they don't allow any cameras." "Bring it." A little. I said, "Wolfgang, this is like real life. This isn't movie life." So they allowed me to take a pad. I could take a pad and a pencil. So they wonderful captain of one showed us all around the plane and where the press sits and where security is. And sure enough, we hear this shouting and yelling, and here comes Bill Clinton, and he gets up, and I'd met him before down in L.A., you know, around his Air Force plane. He says, "You're making my plane look good, right, Billy?" I go, "Yeah, making your plane look good, sir." And he's like, "Yeah," you know, he and Harrison, they must have had a few beers, because they're like, "Hey," they're like, you know, whatever they were doing, hanging out at the ranch. So it was quite a scene. And so we look around Air Force One, leave Harrison there with the president. We get on the plane, and boom, we're back at Santa Monica for dinner, you know, and like I had these girls living with me, and I fired up the barbecue. You know, I got back to my house in Burbank, and I'm like, they're like, where were you? What happened? I said, I could not explain it to you in a million years. I just want to eat, and I could never tell you what just happened. It's too weird.
I just can't imagine. I can't imagine Harrison Ford drunk and being very boisterous, because he's, you know, he's a stoic individual.
It's hard to imagine, isn't it?
Yes,
oh man,
it
you
is.
Can see him when he's like riding around on his golf cart around Sony, bashing into me, bashing into people. He is the coolest guy. I mean, he called me in a number of times in his trailer with, you know, he had the prints out, and you know, he wanted to ask me if I could change something, because he's a carpenter. You know, he sees right away if he has. He said, "Bill, can you make this bigger? I got to jump through it later." And I said, "Sure." You know, and you know, my construction crew would say, "Oh my God, we got to rip." I said, "Hey, Harrison Ford. He's the star of the movie, and he's got a producer's credit."
Yep.
I said, let's rip the back of that thing out and do what Harrison wants, because he's really nice guy, and he really knows what he's doing. He can read a print better than anybody. You know, It's funny, he caught things. He was looking. I thought that was so interesting. You know, that he had found something that he realized was going to be awkward for him to shoot the film later, and he solved the puzzle before it became a big issue for me. So he did me a favor, actually, by saying, I can't get through that stunt. Yeah, I always thought that was pretty cool.
That's a level of dedication in knowing one's craft.
Yeah, no, he's a real, he and Wolfgang gets along with everybody. He just loved working with Wolfgang too. You know, I love watching Wolfgang work too. You know, one day Wolfgang doesn't like when I follow him around, because sometimes I have to follow him around. I need him to look at a print, or I need him to tell him what I'm doing, you know. And one day, you know, he's talking to John Seal, and Wolfgang senses I'm hovering, because I'm always hovering behind directors my whole life. And he says, "What is it, Bill?" I go, "Well, I just want to ask you about this." He said, "Is that the set that?" I said, "Yeah, I just want to make sure." He said, "Do you like it?" I said, "Well, yeah, I love it." And he said, "Well, then build it." I said, "Well, Wolfgang, it doesn't really work that way. I want to make sure that you like it." And he said, "Bill, you know, you're the production designer. John Seal is the cinematographer, and I'm the director. So if you like that set, go build it." So I said, "Okay, Wolfgang." But, you know, you can only do that with these big directors, you know, because if you screw up, the studio's going to say, "What do you mean you just built $1 million corridor that nobody's shooting, Bill?" You know,
Right.
And then you don't get asked back to the dance, you know.
Right.
Well,
but you know, when you're for somebody you know, you can work that way, you know.
Yeah. Somebody you trust, someone you've built a relationship with on many movies. And these are not small budget films either. These are huge movies.
You know, yeah, plus you're these $100 million pictures, you know, they're like $350,000 a day shooting schedules. You know, if you go a day over, that's $350,000. You go 2 days, that's you know, it gets up to $1 million real quick if you're 2 or 3 days behind, and that's a lot of then that's a lot of money. You know?
Right.
That's why they spend a lot of money having me build these sets, because you think, well, why did they let Bill build, you know, a $500 million or $500,000 set? And they said, well, because if it saves us a day, he just saved us money by not having to move all the equipment off the lot there and set up a base camp and then move it all. You know, there's a lot of reasons good production managers and good producers and studios understand. Let's build it and make it simple. It's all lit. We walk in, shoot it, and it's quicker, easier, you know. So, I'm certainly a fan of that, because, you know, the crew I work with, we're a real wrecking crew. We wanted a lot of work. We never wanted to be bored, and we never were bored on shows I worked on. I picked shows that weren't necessarily the best movie that was offered to me. I get offered like 5 for every one I took. I picked the ones that had the most sets because I wanted to design stuff. I didn't want to go out and film a river or something. I wanted to make the river.
Yeah. So is that the reason why you worked on so many big films? Because I was kind of interested in, and it makes sense. You're a production designer. You want to design a production. I mean, it's there in the title, but is that because that's what it is? I mean, some of these movies you did work on some smaller films, but a lot of them, specifically through the 90s, I mean, it's $100 million plus film after another. I can't imagine the amount of work that
Yeah.
went to the Flintstones.
Well, and once that was everything in there was built, designed, sculpted, painted, hard coded. Nothing was off the rack in that movie. But
That's another beautiful set.
Yeah, it is.
I wanted to work at the studios. I didn't want to just wander around town and stand there drinking coffee, by the camera. I wanted stuff to do. And I think it paid off, with my resume is,
Yeah.
now you have to go out sometimes, or people say, oh, he's a lot rat. He just wants to stay around the lot. You got to go out sometimes. But all of these movies that I worked on Wolfgang, yeah, we built the sets at Warner's, but I shot a lot and built a lot in Gloucester outside of Boston for Perfect Storm. Outbreak, we shot a lot up in Ferndale. We shot a lot up in Hawaii, but we were based at Warner Brothers, so I wanted to be based somewhere. So, it was a proper movie. It's not just a road show, which I never liked to, get hired on movies like that.
Right.
And because I generated so much work, all the best illustrators would wait for me, set designers. I had the hottest construction crew and painters and construction coordinators, because they knew if I got a show, I wasn't going to run off to Canada and do it.
Yeah.
They knew, okay, Bill's going to keep us in town near our families, and we're going to have a lot of work to do, and we're going to be able to hire a lot of guys.
Yeah.
And the flip side of that is, when a studio looks to hire me, they know the baggage that comes with me, because there's not just me. I'm the head of the corporation.
Right.
I'm going to want the best decorator I can get, who's going to want the best lead man he can get, and I'm going to hire a coordinator, the best that I work with, who they know right away is going to hire the best painter, the best foreman. I'm a ripple effect, Right. But on the other hand, we complete these big hard shows on schedule and on budget. So that's a big plus too. Yeah, Bill's not cheap, but we get our picture done, and there's no problems. We know we get a professional crew if we put him on. So that worked. I think it worked out well for me. I turned out a lot of movies that won more awards maybe, but I also got to build more sets than anybody in town. So that's the way I wanted to work it, for my career.
Right.
Bill, let me ask you a question. I kind of want to deviate real quick, if that's okay, from your history in film, because we still want to hear a bunch of stories, but I'm kind of curious about your opinion on this, where your history is all about building sets, some amazing, authentic sets that are truly stunning. And you look at today's movie making, and that's almost gone. Like, a lot of stuff is green screened, and like for example, on the Flintstones, you built those cars, and now you see like people riding on a moped covered in a green cloth, and they computer generate the vehicle on that. Yeah. I mean, how do you feel about that now that we're kind of deviating to that?
I got out of the business about 6-7 years ago, and I think I got out at the right time. I got to see the tail end of the real glory time from the 50s and 60s in the film business when I started in the early 70s. And I think I got out before all this green screen. I can tell you that I know the directors I've worked for and actors, they don't want to fake running in front of a green screen. They would rather run down a real hallway,
right,
and jump through a real window into a real whatever. I know that I've had this conversation for years with studios that are always asking me, why am I building this and why am I doing that? And I'm like, I can never quantify it, but I said, look, if I build this whole environment for your actor, I think you're going to get a better performance. I said, we're not standing there against a green screen. If I build all 4 walls, and I build a little hallway off of it and a door, and I fire up the stove so the place smells like, I'm a big fan of smell-o-vision, so I drag seaweed into sets so it smells like the ocean. And I'll get the effects guys to rig the stove so tell all the grips to, cook hamburgers in the set at lunchtime, to get rid of all the paint smell. Like directors, they'll walk into it, and it always cracks me up. They'll walk into a set and they'll go, this just feels right. This really, and I'm thinking, yeah, because we've been drinking beer and eating hamburgers in this diner for 2 weeks. Yeah, it's like it should. I tell people, start carving things, throw shit down on the floor, But and the studios always go, well, they're actors. They'll do what they want. So I could never quantify the performance. But I think you get a better performance when you're not rolling around on a green screen and it's supposed to be whatever you're supposed to be rolling around in.
Right.
And so I think I got out. Somebody invited me down, a friend who was a supervising art director on Suicide Squad, invited me down to Atlanta. I'd never seen some of their stages down there, and he wanted to show me a stage. I happened to be down there to visit somebody, and I went in. They had this big set. Well, no, it wasn't a big. It was a big stage. It's a little set the size of my studio that I'm sitting in right now, and then a huge green screen around it.
Yeah.
I'm like looking at my friend. I said, "You really like this? You like working like this?" He's like, "Well, he's got a family. He's got kids in college. He's got, And I'm like, God, I would just hate. This would be so boring to me to do that.
I would be expecting somebody to go into a weather report, honestly.
Yeah, really. It is like the weatherman in front of a thing. Yeah. So if that answers your question, I'm glad I'm not involved too much in that. I mean,
it does. Thank you.
Every show I've ever had, we have a green screen, but it's extending my set,
right,
or helping it in some ways that I can't do. It's not the whole set. Plus I had drinks one night on, I think we were stuck in Boston, John Seal and I, and I saw him, we got back from a scout, and he said, "Hey, Bill, let's have a drink." So we were drinking for a long time in the bar there at the hotel in Boston. And we were talking about the same thing you just asked me about green screen. And he wasn't a big fan of it. Wolfgang was, because he saw it opened up lots of possibilities for him. But Seal was telling me, he said, I've already seen pictures I've worked on where somebody back in post-production has changed my key light and changed the whole lighting and redone it in post. And eventually we had we're all having beers one night, and Wolfgang said, "I would never let that happen, John. I want the green screen. I'd always contact you." And one of the greatest cinematographers around, John Steele, says, "Yeah, but I won't be available to weigh in on this, Wolfgang. I'll be on some mountaintop shooting something else somewhere. I won't be able to fly to the studio and time it right and look at it right and check it, So he wants, when he lights a set, and any cinematographer will tell you this, I'm sure, when he puts a key light in and he lights the window the way he wants it, he gets the light he wants. He's not going to see some kid in post-production up in San Francisco draw it all in later,
Right.
I mean, it's that's how a cinematographer feels, at least the ones that I used to work with, the big guys I used to work with. And, so that's my feelings on that.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. I really appreciate it. Yeah. It's just because, I look at films like Robocop, the whole ending sequence, well, not the ending sequence, but where they're in the warehouse district. If that was all green screened, I honestly think something would be taken away from it. It's being in that environment that pulls you into it, that pulls you into the darkness of the scene. And exactly, and on a lighter side, the Flintstones, I couldn't imagine watching the Flintstones green screened. The sets are too beautiful. The working animatronics, everything is amazing. I couldn't imagine any of that being computer generated at all.
Isn't it amazing? I mean, that whole town of Bedrock was built in this whole quarry, and then the whole suburban part of Bedrock, all those homes were built in this real famous area of our desert here in Southern California, Vasquez Rocks, where many films have been shot there. But I mean, they were all full scale. These cars, we used to drive them around Universal. We'd drive these cars around. Yeah. Again, Lantieri made those and his group, effects guys. I mean, it was wild. All this furniture that you could really sit on that was carved as rocks, and then all those Henson puppets popping out of things. And I think it's really effective. I mean, that's a really beautiful movie. Rosemary Brandenburg did that, decorated that with me, and she just finished the new Star Wars, so she's been doing a lot of great films over the last few years. But that was a lot of work for the department.
They would never make that movie that way today. I mean, it would be like the new Grinch. It would be CGI. The whole movie would be CGI. Yeah.
Yep.
So it would just, it'd be an electronic cartoon based on an old cartoon, right?
Well, I think people, plus, I mean, I don't know if you even want to get into this, but I'm a big Marvel fan, and
Yeah.
It's so overused on those pictures. I mean, yes, I love them. I watch them all. I'm a big fan of those movies, but after a while, after 100,000 buildings collapse, and you just like, hey man, it's being used too much. It just gets to be. And then sometimes you watch a beautiful movie that has a minimal amount of effects in it, and you go, oh, thank God I can watch something for a while. It's you know how it is. It's just, it gets to be too much sometimes.
Well, to be quite honest with you, and you've done some great films, and this isn't no slight on you. I'm actually a slightly superheroed out. The other two boneheads are more comic knowledgeable than I am, but I mean, there's just so much you can do with a character that may not come back in this iteration, but will come back because the box office is for that. And Hollywood, what do? We do 4 films now, right? We do superhero films, animated films, a small horror films, and what's the 4th one? Maybe a family film or something. That's about it.
Well, the films that I'm in the Academy, of course, in the British Academy, and I think somebody just brought it up the other day. I voted for Logan as one of my favorite films last year, and that had minimal effects that we're just crabbing about right now. A totally non-Marvel movie.
Yeah.
And I think Florida Project was one of my favorite films. Hell and High Water was my favorite film.
Yeah.
Hell and High Water, I think, is one of the best films I've ever seen made. And Florida Project, I love it. And they don't have very many effects in them, that's for sure.
No,
good stories. Just good stories.
Yes, and that is actually one of. Anyway, I could go off about Hell and High Water for the next 10 minutes, but I won't.
Yes.
Because you didn't work on it.
Yeah.
I've got to ask you about. I don't know that I want to say something's your best film, but I gotta say, Master and Commander is a excellent picture.
Yeah, that well, we won a lot of awards for that.
Yeah,
I won the BAFTA for that, myself and my decorator, and we got nominated for an Academy here. But we won a lot of cinematography. We won costuming, and that's working for Peter Weir. This was his dream project for years. To do something like this, and he is really smart, and he's really he really thinks about the films he does. So you have to really be on your toes when you're around Peter, and
right.
He knows. I mean, I used to. I don't know. I knew every bit of the rigging on that ship, every bit of dialogue about how an 18th century fighting frigate works.
Yeah.
I mean, on that ship, we made the sails, we made our cannons, we made the cannonballs, we made the lamps, we made everything on that.
Yeah.
And that was really quite an enterprise. I mean, I had not tech advisors, but historians coming into my office down at Rosarito Beach, down at that Fox Studios where we were based, and they'd see things on my desk and they go, "Oh my God, where did you find this?" And I said, "Well, I got a whole warehouse full of them." They just almost die, because we were hand hammering the metal, we were melting cow's horn to make, fiberglass type. It was just on and on. And
wow.
We're braiding our own ropes. We were building our own blocks out of oak. We were carving our own ship's heads. We built our own masts. We had miles and miles of rope we wove. We had shipwrights from Boston come out, shipwrights from Australia, tearing out the whole fronts of real ships that we bought and redoing the stern and the bow. And I'm building a whole complete 180-foot ship on a huge gimbal in that huge tank there in Rosarito.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And, that's really big time filmmaking to do things like that, except for maybe Perfect Storm. That was a lot of work on that Master and Commander. Whew.
I can't imagine. I know Mel Gibson says that Peter Weir is one of the few geniuses he's actually ever met in his life.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just a Mel Gibson quote that's in my head. I know not everybody likes Mel.
Well, he's a really great writer too. Peter's Peter's a real interesting guy. You know, there's a lot of things going on in his head. He's real kind of quiet, but it's really, it's a quiet reserve. You know, he watches everything. And when he comes to a meeting, you have to have your ducks in order, you know. And I run with a pretty high level group of people there, art directors, set designers, illustrators. So I brought a lot of good people to him because Fox knew me from I think Fox knew me from Dr. Dolittle and another couple of pictures I did there. And Duncan Henderson was the producer on the picture, and I'd done 4 or 5 pictures for Duncan. So they brought me into the project, and I had a long interview with Peter. So he was looking for somebody, but he's looking for a team. You know, he's no dummy. He didn't want somebody that hadn't been around building these big sets, because he knew it was a lot of work to get done, and it had to be done on a schedule there, or we were cooked. You know, so he got his movie done. So.
Well, I know you're probably getting a little tired, but Chad has got to ask at least about one person, and I'm sure you've been asked about several times. Go ahead, Chad.
Oh, I don't think we should close on this. I think we should close on one. We need to close on one of his more iconic films, but I want to talk about Steven Seagal.
Do you have a good Steven Seagal story?
Oh man, do I? Oh my God. Oh my God, yeah, I did Glimmer Man with him, and
right.
He is. I love the way he fights, and I'm a big fan. You know, from Enter the Dragons. I love these movies. You know, and he, God, you know, so many stories. He's such a character. You know, he's so full of himself. You know, he's got this whole backstory. He always thinks he's a ex-CIA agent, and he's always he's become what he always fantasized with. He's got this deep cover. But, one thing Warner's did is Warner's builds a lot of sets for him because they want to keep him on schedule. They want to keep him at the studio because they don't want him just sort of wandering around, showing up late, because he always shows up late, drives up in a limo. I mean, and at this time it was a scandal. He was married to Kelly LeBrock, I guess, right? And
right.
He was having an affair with his nanny or his babysitter or whatever, this girl. And I saw them together so much. Like one day he invites he said he's trying to rent stuff from his house in Beverly Hills for the film, and I'm like, first of all, I'm thinking, God, this is really weird. So he invites me and the decorator over to see if there's anything he likes. So we walk in his bedroom, takes us upstairs. We walk in the bedroom, and there's this girl that I'm reading about in all the scandal sheets laying there partially naked on the bed, and he just walks right by her, and she tries quickly to cover up. And he's like, could you rent my saddle? Could you rent my tiger thing? Can we tell you? Ernie, the decorator on that show, goes, yeah, sure, Steven. Yeah, anything, Steven, sure. And I'm thinking, like, God, what a weird thing. I'll tell you a funny story. We're down in the old Herald building in the middle of LA on a Saturday Scout, and it's an extremely ornate lobby. This is for the final fight he has, if you've ever remembered Glimmer Man. He has a final
I remember the
fight
Glimmer Man, yes, sir.
I've got to be honest. I do not remember Glimmer Man and a lot of it. I'm sorry.
He fights this climactic battle with this really badass guy that's killed his wife and killed everybody, and there's this climactic fight. So I'm standing, Steven's there. He comes up in his limo. He gets out, and I'm standing with the producer, the cameraman, a grip electrician, just a few people, for a quick Saturday Scout to see if we could shoot the Herald building, right, which is extremely ornate. Like Hearst built this unbelievably ornate lobby. I've never seen anything like it. And so Steven doesn't like it. So he says, turns to me, and he goes, he didn't want to go there and shoot. He turns to me and he goes, Bill can build it on stage. Can't you, Bill? And I'm like, oh my God. And the producer is standing next to me. He grips my arm so hard. And I'm going, yeah, I can build it, Steven. I can build it. And he says, see, Bill can build it on stage. So why don't we shoot it on stage so I don't have to come down here? So I'm like, oh my God. Everybody's like, oh shit, here goes another $500,000 because we got to build this whole thing. But he disappears. We look around and he's gone. So we had one last stop on the Scout, the top of this building. They always shoot in LA. It's got a big think Russell McKay shot Highlander up in the top of this little building where there's the old-fashioned sign on top of the roof and all this stuff. It was a big cracked hotel, and Steven's gone, and the location manager goes, "Oh my God, he's going to the next location." So they throw me in a car. We race across LA, leave everybody to look around that set and try to figure out how they're going to give me another $500,000. But we race up there. I get there in front of this building on Main Street just in time to see Steven and this girl that he was dating, scandalizing Kelly and all of the town, dating his nanny, getting out of the car. And he's always dressed in black, just like Steven Seagal, right?
Yeah.
He takes a gun out of the compartment. He sticks a gun, big gun, in his waistband. And he walks across, man, this is Saturday, so there's a lot of traffic or people around. And I'm here to see this. And he sees me roar up. I hop out of the car. The location guy has to run and try to find somebody and park his car. And I see Steven walking towards me with this gun. And we walk into that hotel with all those crack junkies laying around. I thought they were going to die. And I'm going, "Steven, shouldn't we wait for everybody?" And I'm doing it. He said, "No, I know this building. I know what I want to do." We get in the elevator. We go to the top of the roof. He runs to the edge of the roof, and he goes over the rail. There's like just a rail. Then you fall down 8 stories. And he gets over the rail. And he's leaning over and said, "I can do this. I can rappel here." And I'm thinking, holy crap, he's going to fall, and I'm never going to work again in Hollywood because I'm the only one here. And I'm going to go, why didn't you stop it? And I'm going, how do you stop this big behemoth, And, he has a gun on him, in front of everybody. He says, "Okay, I've seen enough. I know I can do it. So you're building this set on stage too?" I said, "Yeah, I'm building you a 4-story hotel on stage." He said, "Okay, we'll just do it there." I'm like, they all roar up later. I said, "Where'd he go?" I said, "He got in the limo and he drove away with his girlfriend. That's all I know." But, he'd have me, for some reason, he liked me for some reason. I don't know why, but he had me on the stages when he'd rehearse his fight scenes, in some of these bars. Like, I built a really great bar for him that he has a big, great bar. In fact, I think it's rated one of his top 5 fights in that bar. And I'm watching him work out with he has some people he works out with. And he asked me to change some things in the bar. He goes, "Can you put a rail right here?" I said, "Well, Steven, it's already designed." He said, "Just put a rail there. It's going to be great. I'll use it." And I said, "Okay." So he changes things. And sure enough, I put a bar and a rail and I move some things. He uses them. So he's really not as goofy as a filmmaker as you would think. He really knew what he wanted. And he gets in a fight in that bar that is awesome. He fights like real big fight. There's no like woo, 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 kung fu-y stuff. It's just big guys bashing each other. And if you ever want to look at the greatest scenes, that's that bar fight where the guy comes up to him and goes, "I'm gonna all the mushu pork ponytail stuff on you isn't gonna save you from me." And he goes that great line. He goes, "You should. I've got some of my something that could help that bruise on your forehead." And the guy goes, "I don't have a bruise on my forehead." Well, wow, that starts the whole fight. It's an awesome fight. Just look it up on YouTube just to see that fight. He destroyed my set, but it was awesome to watch. So, but he is, like everybody will tell you, quite the character. He is.
Yeah,
I mean, he started eating. They sent him to a fat farm in somewhere to slim down because his butt gets so big. And my art department was right at the entrance of Warner Brothers, where they had an art department. I'm on the ground floor. And he started coming in, hanging out in our art department. But what he was doing was he was eating our craft service, donuts and coffee and crap we have in the back. And I got called into the producer's office actually saying, you can't have him coming into your office all the time. I said, well, because he started putting weight on again. And I'm like, well, first of all, he's Steven Seagal. So how am I going to stop him? And second of all, he is a producer. He's got a producer's credit on this thing. How am I going to stop him? He said, well, he's eating all your craft service. I said, I know. He's eating all our cookies and craft service and stuff we have in there in the morning that the girls bring in for the art department. He was eating it all. And I said, well, you tell him. You're producers. You stop him. That's below my pay grade. I'm a below the line guy. You guys are all producers. You tell Steven Seagal not to go in the art department and eat all their cookies. I'm not telling Steven Seagal that.
I wonder if his mentor, his idol was Marlon Brando and he was trying to emulate everything Brando did.
maybe. I mean, he's kind of a pathetic character now when you see him. You know,
yeah.
Well,
he's
I just
he's a
curious.
nut.
Yeah, he was double dipping, trying to, he's getting his salaries, producer credit, and he was trying to rent stuff out, and he was being cheap.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if he was just a really cheap person or.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
well, anyway, so our other bonehead, and I know I said we were going to wrap it up, but I have a couple more questions. He texted me and said, you've got to ask him if he has a Joe Don Baker story. He worked with Joe Don Baker, man, was the text I was getting from him.
Yeah, funny. I was just thinking about Joe Don. I worked for him on The Pack.
Yeah.
I art directed him called The Pack that he was in, and I always sort of liked him, really. I know he worked on I worked for Sequoia Pictures a lot at Warner's for Paul Heller and Fred Weintraub. When Fred Weintraub left Warner's, like everybody, he got a picture deal there, and that, I mean, I was standing there with Fred one day when he goes, Fred saved Warner's when he brought Woodstock to Warner's, the music album, because Warner's was going to be cut up for parts too, but he said one day, I remember Fred said to me, well, Bill, I got to save Warner's again. And I said, well, how, Fred? I worked in the office, when I wasn't working on my sculptures. And he said, I'm going to make the greatest martial arts movie ever made. And I go, Kung Fu? Because I'd only seen Five Fingers of Death. He says, no, I'm going to make this movie with Bruce Lee, and it's going to be called Enter the Dragon. I'm like, oh, Fred, you're not going to save and eventually, of course, it did. It made $100 million profit on a hardly any movie, and it did save Warner's. They didn't get busted up and sold for commercial property. But Fred used Joe Don Baker a lot in his Sequoia Pictures movies. I saw Joe Don Baker a lot. I'll tell you a story. Joe Don Baker was hired. Wolfgang hired him to do a bit on Outbreak as the head of the White House aide who gets everybody in, and discusses blowing up this town of Ferndale, where this virus started. And he got fired the first day. I saw him. He parked. He was looking around. He looked a little like might have had a few belts. He saw him and he said, where can I park in this goddamn studio? So I showed him where to park, and I walked over to the stage, and he got fired the next day. And I guess Wolfgang didn't like his performance or him or something, because he's a real curmudgeon. So they hired that great guy, he's dead now, that did that scene, RK.
Hold on. I will pull it up right now. Chad can
He did a great job in that scene, man. That's a spooky scene when that emissary from says, I want everybody on board. I want everybody to know what we're about to do. We're going to bomb that town and kill everybody in that town. I want nobody running to the press saying, I didn't know or we didn't know. I want everybody to sign off on this. And he does such a great job, that actor. Much better than Joe Don.
I'm having a hard time finding it right now on IMDb. I am so sorry. I don't remember the character's name, and I can't remember.
Okay, I got a picture in the Philippines. Yeah, it's initials and then a name. I worked with Joe Don Baker and Susan Sarandon on a B movie called Checker Flag or Crash in the Philippines. Years ago. That's how I got my art director's card, actually, in 76, 77. This was right before Susan Sarandon did Atlantic City and blew up, and Joe Don Baker played a race car driver, and we were shooting it outside of Manila in the jungle, this road race film, and on the other side of the island, Coppola was shooting Apocalypse Now. So they were this crazy movie on the other side of the island, and I was on a smaller B movie on closer to town, but I heard stories, the stunt guys would try to get to the airport in Manila, when we were based in Manila at the Queen's Hotel, Eldest Hotel, and they would tell me stories. They would come in and use our showers in the hotel. They go, you can't believe what's happening, Bill. We're all living in tents on the other side of the island. And I'm going, oh my God, it sounds terrible what you guys are going through. And now we've all read the books and heard the stories. And, Apocalypse Now is probably might even be my top 3 films of all time, I think. I love Apocalypse Now.
What are the other 2?
Trying to think offhand, I'd have to think about that, but I know Apocalypse has always stayed right at the top of I used to do a top 10
Yeah.
film thing in my art department.
Mhm.
You know, I'd have my art department coordinator do 10 lines,
Uh-huh.
and everybody could fill it in, but you couldn't fill it in. You know, you had to pick 10 films out of all genres,
Yeah.
not top. And people would go. It was really a psychological test, and we do it for the whole length of the 6-month show, or however long you're on a show. We pin them up on a board. You could change it, and as other pictures occurred to you, and people would start screaming, "I need top 20," or "Can't we just do top 20, top 10 westerns and top 10 love stories?" I said, "No, you have to put Darby O'Gill and the Little People on your list, and drop Apocalypse Now off the list. You know, whatever your pleasure is." And they would go crazy. These people, these art devices. I saved them all. I got them all saved somewhere. So I can't remember what my top. I know. What's the great movie that Michael did with James Caan with Tangerine Dream music?
Thief.
Where he's
Thief.
Thief. I think Thief is always in the top 3. Thief,
I like Thief.
Apocalypse Now.
Yeah.
I love that movie so much. He's so badass in that. Thief, Apocalypse Now. I'd have to think about it. It's probably a great old Western. I
Yeah.
love Tombstone. I love Western. Or, there's a lot of great movies out there. I'd have to see I don't remember what my top 10 is, but it was always a fun experiment to do with people. They would go nuts.
All right. So, I could talk to you for another 3 hours about Deep Blue Sea, Small Soldiers, Hocus Pocus, Newsies. Well, my wife's a huge Newsies fan. Out of those,
yeah.
What would you like to talk about to kind of wrap up? Chad, did you have something before I started to?
No. No, I just figured we'd talk about one of those, and then.
Yeah. So, I mean,
well,
go ahead.
There's so many movies that we could talk to you about.
Right.
Yeah. Well, we'll do this. Maybe we'll do this again sometime in a couple of months or something like that.
That would be great. So let's end with Small Soldiers then. Go ahead.
Well, I love. I worked for Joe on Piranha. I art directed Piranha and we shot that down. Actually, we shot in the pool here, the Olympic pool in LA, and then down in Texas. In fact, I just talked to Joe quite a bit the other night. In fact, they were about to show, this is when they were having the screening of Piranha, which was great to see a beautiful 35 millimeter print. I think it might have been his print or John Davidson's
Was
print.
that at the
that was at the Egyptian.
At the Egyptian.
The Howling and the Piranha. So Joe was there, early, and I was talking to Joe, and I told him a funny story. He cracked up because I ran into Barbara Steele at a Monstapalooza about a couple of years ago maybe, and we started chatting, and I'm sure you guys are big Barbara Steele fans from all her movies. And she remembered, this is what I was telling Joe. First of all, she says to me, "Can you believe that Joe never ages?" I said, "It is weird," because she looked great. That's how it started. I said, "Gee, you look great, Barbara." And she said, "Yeah, thanks." And she does. And then she mentioned Joe, and then she started telling me. She said, "Remember how we had no money in Texas, and you had to auction off all the props to raise money to pay the extras?" And I'm thinking, God, I do kind of remember. She remembered. Now this is a woman that's done 200 movies, right?
Yeah,
at least.
That, yeah.
She remembered that whole Piranha experience. So I was telling Joe this before we went in to see the movie screen, and then at the break when he and John Sayles got up to talk about the film, he was mentioning that how the budget was and how it was tight, and they couldn't all the kids that we used locals from the colleges, and so anyway, so Joe had me back for Small Soldiers, so it was great to be back with him, and I love that movie. I think Joe was not really happy with the movie. I know he was, he's always kind of, he's always like kind of got this hangdog feeling sometimes, and I think that Amblin wasn't, was fussing too much with his vision of the movie. But I love the movie. I mean, it was fun for me, and I was there to cheer him up, and we had a lot of fun. I mean, that's also become a little cult film too. Small Soldiers. I don't think it did big business at the time, but all those little soldiers were so cool. And again, Stan Winston made all these. I have a lot of behind the scenes. I posted something about 6 months ago, and God, everybody on the Small Soldiers sites went nuts. I have anything you see
on the internet of Stan Winston's shop and behind the scenes stuff. I shot.
Really?
Because I had a small Sony handy. They only made 500 of them, handycams, and Dustin Hoffman gave me it. It's a kind of a gift. He gave one to Bauhaus and one to me, gifts of that little camera. So I started shooting behind the scenes stuff all the time. So I have all the making of the Small Soldiers on 8mm tape, and I'm trying to get them transferred nicely to, for my purposes, just DVDs,
right?
So I could play them. But all that stuff that is on the internet came from me, because I'd shoot it and I'd make a dupe for Stan and his guys to see how the little soldiers are going. So I was fascinated with the whole project. And of course, we built all these cool sets. We built 2 huge houses, in the back lot there at Warner Ranch. And, we built all these specialized stage sets so, that the small soldiers could be puppeteered. And I think it's a really cool movie. I think Joe did a great job on that movie.
Well, I think Joe does a great job on everything. I think the issue has been he's just been very unlucky. For example, Inner Space is a wonderful movie that just...
Yeah, I sat next to him at the screening.
Yeah.
I sat next to him. He was... that's a movie. That's an unsung movie that's so cool, too.
Yes,
it really is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I talked to Joe. Again, it was a little bit like the Walter Hill story we started with early on, is Joe said to me, I just can't get things going. It's just not... He talked to me for I saw him at Monsterpalooza, and we sat there for half an hour and talked. He was waiting to go in to do a big thing in their big hall there where he gets up and talks film. And we just chatted for a long time, and he says, it's just not the same business, is it, Bill? I said, hey, I'm out of the business now. But, Joe wants to work. But, Mick Garris wrote a thing for them. They did kind of an kind of, what do you call it? Not an analog, but
an anthology.
A series of stories. An anthology.
Yeah.
And, but he said if it wasn't for Mick writing that and getting us all back together to do that, I really haven't been doing anything. He seemed a little hangdog the last time I saw Joe.
Yeah.
But he's such a film historian. He can
really
tell
is.
you more about film from any angle you want to discuss with than anybody. He loves film so much. He collects films. He knows all these. Have you guys ever seen the book that came out last year called 1,000 Cuts?
No.
About collectors of film. It's fabulous.
I
went to see him speak, and these kind of nerdy guys like me, like you guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
That love film. And they all live in Burbank, these guys, and they all collect old 16mm and 35mm films, and all of their wives are threatening to leave them because they're cutting holes in the living room wall to do a projector room in the den that was supposed to be the something. And so Joe was talking along with these guys about the history of collecting films, from, Roddy McDowall getting arrested early on. I remember that when I was a kid, Roddy McDowall getting arrested for too many 16mm films, and Joe has a huge collection. But these are the guys that saved films, because now the studios are trying to patch these together and re-release them. They have to go to these collectors, which maybe not illegal, but maybe, somebody slipped them a reel from somewhere. They need pieces of their films now to patch together to re-release films now. So I found it fascinating, and he knows all about that era. And he was telling stories about driving by Technicolor and seeing stacks of canisters of 35mm film just sitting on the curb being thrown away of these films. But if you get the book 1,000 Cuts, it's in my film library. It's just a fabulous book about these guys, and where they found films, and they were. It's just. But anyway, I can't speak highly enough of Joe. He's really one of my heroes. And I see the lines at conventions waiting to hear him talk, and maybe Roger's there sometimes or somebody else, but they really want to hear Joe talk about those days.
So let me ask you 2 quick questions. One, why haven't you been on his podcast, or did I miss it? The films that made us, the movies that made us.
Yeah, I know about it. I don't know. I've never been asked.
You need to be asked. Well, that's okay. He's turned to us down if it makes you feel any better. So at least you've been on Bonehead, where Joe's not done it. It's okay. We've been turned down by lots of people. But the second one is, why did you retire? Because you retired. You were still making some. You worked with John too. Go ahead.
Yeah. I know. It was fun work. John Woo? I mean, that was so great. I really felt like, a lot of my friends were having heart problems, and I lost friends to drug issues, alcohol issues.
Yeah.
Many of my friends have had that big scar down their chest because of the stress. It's a really stressful business, and to be quite honest with you, I quit drinking about 6 years ago.
Congratulations.
And I was one of the people. You can't be in the business. If you go out with Wolfgang or John Seal, they have a bottle on the truck. John Seal, and you can't. It's a very social business, and
Right.
I decided that I was, for health reasons, my doctor said, look, I just drank wine, but it was like, time to ease back. And I thought, maybe this is a time to get out of the business. If I it's no longer walking across the street from Warner's and having a couple of glasses of wine with the guys. Maybe I want to clean up my act. So, I kind of quit. I'm real happy, and I have some money, and
Right.
I don't have as much money as I used to have, but I have enough money to hang out and do my art. And, and I help people with videos now too. There's a lot of filmmakers where I live here, young filmmakers. So I finance them myself, little $2,000 or $3,000 things, and help put together a crew. And, I loan stuff, and, I'm kind of in the business. I shoot a lot of videos for you. I think, Joe, you see my House of Dots videos with my friend in the desert. We're out shooting stuff for her YouTube video channel. And, I'm always out shooting just little iPhone things, but I edit them here and, whatever. So I kind of feel like I'm still there. And I go to a lot of conventions. I'm in the Academy, so I get invited to a lot of stuff. And
Right.
I go to the awards most every year. So I never really wanted to get in the Academy. Years ago, they tried to get me in. Actually, Howard Koch did when he was the president of the Academy. They were looking for younger members then. That was when I was a younger member, or would have been a younger member. I didn't want to join it. It was kind of like a Woody Allen thing, who wants to be in that club? But my older friend said, hey, look, when you retire, Bill, if you're in the Academy, it'll be great because you can always be involved in film. I can use their library.
Yeah.
I get invited to every screening, maybe 10 screenings a day I get invited to, during award season.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm in the Art Directors Guild still, a paid member. So, I guess David Gersh calls me all the time. And I said, don't call me about anything, David. He says, but people want you to work. I said, I don't want to work anymore, David. I'm so content just living my little simple life now.
That's amazing.
But the answer is it's a very stressful business. These are very stressful. They're giving people like me like $10 million and saying, spend this money and don't let us down, and it's a lot, you want it, and it has to look good. Yeah, not just spend it correctly, but make it look good. So
Well,
it's
sir,
that's a lot.
You have made them look fantastic.
Try to.
You have
I've
done
had good people.
Succeeded.
Yeah.
Good decorators, good illustrators, good, set designers. A lot of these people I've worked with are, just tremendous. You have their master's degree in design, and the movie business attracts interesting people like that. They could be in the outside world designing, but it's much more fun to be in a business where you're designing a volcano one day and a spaceship the next and a haunted house the next. It's much more exciting to apply yourself to the movie business. For all these great architects and designers. So It's a fun group. It's a fun that way.
Well, thank you so much for your time. It has been an absolute pleasure. I hope this hasn't sucked too bad for you.
No, it's fun. I enjoy it. People are interested in this, and I enjoy talking about it. It dredges up a lot of memories for me. So that's fun to talk to you guys about it.
And I definitely want to take you up on that offer of coming back because, like I said, we didn't talk about John Woo. We didn't talk about. We didn't go in depth about Hocus Pocus. I didn't get my Kurt Russell story that I was hoping to get.
Oh, do you have one quick Kurt Russell story for Chad before we go? Just one.
For Chad.
I'll tell you one real quick story. Kurt Russell, was starring in the Poseidon. I'm sitting next to him one day, and I love Tombstone. Right? It's like I think it's one of the best westerns ever made.
Agreed.
So, and I also know George Cosmatos.
Yep.
and I know what a pig he is, you know, because I've had lunch with him a few times. And I said to Kurt one day, he's sitting there all dressed up, he's wet, you know, waiting to go back and go on this huge, oh my God, the set we built, 6 stories on stage 16 at Warner's. It was fire and rain and all this shit. So I'm just talking to Kurt, and I say, you know, what I can't imagine, I was telling him how much I love Tombstone. He said, oh, thanks, and everything. I go, what I don't understand is how George Cosmatos could direct that movie. And he said, George Cosmatos did not direct that movie. I directed that movie. And then somebody called him to the set, and I never got to hear about what he was going to say. I go, and I never got to ask him, like, I want to know more. I want to know more. But
because it was such.
He looked
Bill.
He looked at me and said he didn't do that movie. I did.
It was such a weird fit. The guy who directed Leviathan directed one of the best westerns of all time.
But Bill,
Yeah.
have you not seen in the last couple of years, a lot of that's come out, and I guess Val Kilmer, whom I've met, who actually can't talk much anymore, actually has let this out that Kurt Russell directed a lot of that movie. A lot of this has come out.
Oh, that's just,
Google it if you have a chance.
oh, that's interesting. I hadn't heard that. You know, I go to Tombstone for 4 or 5 days every year.
Wow.
And I was there. I go for gun-down days, and I just stay. I love the West. I'm always in Bisbee at the haunted hotel there, the Copper Queen, and I'm always at Roswell at the UFO Museum, and I'm always in Tombstone for a while. So I've been there when Val Kilmer's there, and that town, they line up for a mile to meet Val Kilmer.
Yep.
They love that movie there, and they love Val Kilmer. He's there sometimes. He's an artist, you know. He sells his art there too.
Right.
But isn't that? I'll tell you another story of George Cosmatos' story. You know, I know an illustrator, storyboard artist that worked with him on that movie, on Tombstone, and she told me a story one day. This is George. George is eating a bag of Cheetos, or no, he's sitting in his director's chair right by this woman, very proper woman, and the camera. He gets out of his chair, he turns his back on the set to take a leak. So he's taking a piss, and while he's taking a piss, he has a can of Cheese Whiz, and he's squirting it into his mouth. And the assistant director says they're ready. He calls action, all while he's doing this.
Oh, God.
The true story from the storyboard artist that was sitting next to him. She could not believe it.
That's a fantastic story.
Yeah.
It was unreal, this image of this. Oh, my God. Because he's real good friends with the decorator I've used on a dozen pictures, Bobby Gould, who did Leviathan.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
Bobby. And that's a great movie. And he knows
It
George
really
real
is.
well.
Yeah. The
So
creature.
he invited me.
Go
He
ahead.
invited me to the creature that sank all the time. He invited me to lunch with George one day because he said, "Do you want to meet George?" I said, "Yeah, well, I'm having lunch with us." I tag along. We're having lunch. George is eating, and he's spitting food at me while he's eating.
Oh.
He's up, dude, spitting food, and I'm looking at my friend, the decorator, who just thinks he's a character, and I'm thinking, God, this is kind of gross. This big guy is spitting food at me. While I was like, he was too much, man.
Oh.
But I never worked for him. Maybe I would have enjoyed it if I'd worked
Well,
for him. I don't know.
his son Pan is very talented, right?
I don't know. I don't
he
know.
directed Mandy. Look up Mandy.
I like. Did he? Oh, is that he direct Mandy? Oh,
he
that's
directed
interesting.
Mandy
Yes,
with
sir.
Nicolas Cage. That's Pan, because I can never say the last name correctly. But yeah, that's Pan. That's
Cosmatos, right?
yeah.
I didn't.
He
know
looks
that
like his father.
He looks like him too. Yeah, he's a very talented kid. Well, his kid.
Oh, I got to look it up. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I
Well,
look him
hey,
up.
there we go. We gave you some information. 2 things you got to look up: Penn, and also look up about the stories about. And it was Val Kilmer. It wasn't Kurt Russell. It was Val Kilmer that said no. Kurt Russell directed that movie.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? So you heard it from another source too. Yeah, that's
Oh,
interesting.
Yes, and you can Google it. It's all out there right now, Bill. So,
Well, that makes more sense. You know, plus Tombstone was written and started by that other director. You know, who probably
Right.
set in motion. You know, a lot of the great themes and bits that were played out. So
And he was fired in the first few days or weeks, correct? Yeah.
But you know, all that prep that goes into sort of establishing, you know, working on the script and working on all that came from the other guy. I forget his name offhand, the first director.
Can't remember his name either.
So Well, George just stepped into that, and probably Kurt was like, "Yeah, I love this picture." And it's funny that the Kevin Costner Wyatt Earp was the big A picture, but everybody loves the B picture, Tombstone.
Yeah.
I love that. And plus, historians that I've talked to, and I've been in Tombstone a lot, and I've been in the Wyatt Earp Museum, I've been to all the graves, I've been everywhere researching this. They all agree that Tombstone is the much more accurate picture of that whole gunfight and of all the Earp's background and everything. So, for whatever, not that I want movies to be realistic, but for whatever that's worth, that's interesting, isn't it? That the B picture got it more right.
Yeah. So I could talk to you another hour about Westerns and
same here.
I'm in Deadwood and blah, 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 because I spent some time in Deadwood. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Well, we'll just call me back in a few months and stuff, and we'll do another one if you got time.
We would love to. How about we schedule it for 6 months from now, and that'll give us time to forget what we talked about in between and just relive this all over.
that's I'll probably forget it too. That sounds good.
That sounds great. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure. We appreciate it, man. Have a wonderful night.
Okay.
And thank you for giving us your time.
You too. Take care, guys.
No problem.
See you too.
Bye.
Thanks, Bill.
Sure.
Ah.